Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our weekly recap by the Defiant. Today is a special one. We have Ian Rogers from Ledger as a guest here to explain and talk with us about, probably the biggest headline of the week, which is all the controversy around Ledger's new wallet recovery feature. So we'll definitely, we'll start with that. If you have questions for him and Ledger, please drop them in the comments and we'll address them. And then after having Ian with us, we'll go over all of the other big crypto and DeFi headlines, the PSYOP buyers getting wrecked, Tether buying Bitcoin, the SEC telling Coinbase, too bad we're not answering, and other regulatory news in the EU being a bit more positive than here in the US. So those were some of the major headlines, but let's start with Ledger. So Ian, you are Chief Experience Officer there. We were just commenting what a crazy week it must have been for you guys. So just to get everyone on the main page, kind of the basics of what happened here is that Ledger introduced an upgrade to its software, which would allow users to recover their seed phrase. And this was an opt-in feature, but the fact that Ledger is able to access users' seed phrase anyways is what really caused a lot of backlash among the crypto community. Kind of the concern being, even if it's an opt-in feature, nobody wants their wallet provider to have access to their keys, I think is what it boils down to. So Ian, I mean, what from Ledger's point of view, why the decision to do this upgrade in the first place?
Well, first of all, it's important for people to understand how hardware wallets work, or how wallets in general work. I mean, wallets need access to your private key so that they can sign things. So all of your wallets have access to your private key. That's how hardware wallets work. And then, your seed phrase is derived, from an algorithm that's on your private key, and then that's how seed phrases are created. So I think a big misconception here is that people feel like there's something new, there's some kind of new access to your private key that there isn't. And that's I think one thing to clear up. And our CTO Charles Guillemet has a great thread. He has a couple great threads. I mean, multiple over the past couple of days. And they're retweeted on the Ledger Twitter handle and on mine as well. If you want to check those out and kind of do your own research. But there isn't a new attack vector if you don't upgrade to the service. For us, this is actually a service that we've had in the works for more than 2.5 years. I joined the company in January of 2021, and I was looking at an old blog post from Ledger Today where I actually mentioned a seed phrase backup and recovery service in the future in January of 2021. So you could actually say we're pretty late with the service by those standards. But it's genuinely difficult to do. And I've talked about it publicly a lot. It was in a Wired article 2 weeks ago. So the way that it got out to users, I mean, A, there's a confusion about how hardware wallets work generally, and B, it was sort of leaked in release notes instead of that we were planning to do a real announcement at the beginning of next week. So we didn't have a chance. It sort of went to negative speculation before people saw what the product is. But to answer your question, the why behind the product is, from our perspective, there's two major hurdles to bringing, the next 100 million people into the world of crypto. One is onboarding, and the other one is connectivity to wallet connected apps. So the connectivity to wallet connected apps, we're working on this project called Ledger Extension. It's a work in progress. You can download it and use it in Safari if you'd like. But we've improved the onboarding in Ledger Nano and in Ledger in Ledger Stacks. It's much better because we've got a screen to work with. But people are still understandably scared of the seed phrase, and in a way, if you aren't scared of it, then you don't understand it. You really do need to think hard about what you do with that seed phrase. And people do bad things with it. They put it in notes, they put it in email, they put it on a piece of paper, and there's not a lot of kind of good operational security around it, and we want to help people with that major challenge. Also, with this product, it comes with $50,000 of recoverage, basically. So you can think of it as something where for the vast majority of people in crypto, we've done the research that tells us that 90% of the people in crypto have less than $50,000 in value. So it's a $10 a month service, so it's optional. It's also for pay. Certainly not everyone will take it, and it gives the people who want it. And by the way, we've also done the research on the Ledger customer base, and more than 50% of our customer base told us they do want this product. I've never in my life done market research on my customers and had them tell me they want, that more than 50% of them want a new product. And I think that for many, many, many people, this is a killer feature. I also think that, for people who have a $5 million bag and, are ultra concerned about privacy and have great operational security, this isn't the right product. And that's
Right.
fine.
So I think that the fact that people can opt in, and those who are concerned about security, privacy, they won't opt in. But I think the concern is Ledger just having that access. And we have in our story here the concern about an API that makes this access even easier. So, and I think this also comes in the context of there has been a data leak before from Ledger. So I think it's that's kind of adding to the concern here. And I think let's see. One of our audience members is saying that why not launch this in a separate device? But
well, I understand the train of thought there, but I really encourage people to read Charles's thread about how wallets work. I mean, all of your wallets have access to do this feature. There's nothing that we've added, to do this. You can't sign a transaction unless you have access to the private key, and the secret recovery phrase is derived from the private key. So that's I understand, and I also understand the sentiment around the data leak and the concern that brings. But they're very separate things. Ledger hardware has never been breached. Ledger's crypto products have never been breached. The security that we had 3 years ago now was actually not a security breach on any of Ledger's services. It was a security breach of our email provider and of Shopify. That could have happened to absolutely anyone in the world who uses those products. So I can understand, but that's when you kind of look, when you double click and then look at the details, there's kind of no there. And that's what I encourage people to do, rather than be emotional, do your own research and look into it. And lots of kind of cool heads have kind of looked under the hood and said, okay, if you don't opt into the service, then there's no change. There's no change from yesterday to tomorrow. And if you do opt into the service, there are a different set of concerns, right? You're now, supplying identification to a third party, in this case, CoinCover, who will identify you if you need your seed phrase back. And it costs $10 a month. In return for that, there's a backup of your seed phrase in the cloud that's been done with, the top-notch security, and we explain in great detail how that works. And if that's not a product you want, then simply don't opt for it.
For sure. So if you can go over how this recovery system works in kind of broad strokes. So you said you provide identification to a third party, and then the seed phrase is held in some sort of like custody?
Correct. Yeah. So Charles Guillemet did a nice tweet thread on exactly how the tech on this works, and he's our CTO, so he can probably do a better job on deep tech, but I can give you the overview. So what happens is, again, we take your secret recovery phrase, we encrypt it. This is all done on the Nano. It's sharded into 3, and then it's given to 3 different custodians, which are in 3 different jurisdictions: EU, UK, and US. And you do an identification on the way in. Like you show your passport. People say KYC. It's not really KYC because it's not an official kind of government thing. It's not like when you buy crypto and you do a KYC. It's an identification. So CoinCover can identify you on, in the case of a recovery. So if you do a recovery, then you identify twice. So you identify with 2 different providers. And it's a very high degree of security on that identification. And there of course we know that identifications can be tricky. They're not always perfect. It goes all the way to talking to someone in person if they can't identify you and you really need to prove who you are. So it's a very high degree of security on the recovery. And like I said, CoinCover provides up to $50,000 in coverage should something go wrong with the recovery in the kind of unlikely scenario, but something does go wrong with the recovery. So for it's the way to think about this, I think, is I understand what people are focused on, but let's zoom out. We all want to bring the next 100 million people into crypto, and then think about, where are those funds going to be? Like, where do you want them? Do you want them in custody or self-custody? And if you want them in self-custody, do you want them somewhere secure, like a hardware wallet, or somewhere less secure, like a software wallet? And then so I think those of us that are on the Defiant and watching the Defiant probably want self-custody, and we probably want security. So I think we're over that first hurdle with your audience. Then it's just, well, which hardware wallet do you want? And really, like, that's up to the customer. That's customer choice. And we, certainly, to me, choice is the whole point of what it is we're doing, and sovereignty and really being able to choose. For us, and then within that, you have a choice between Ledger, which is 90+% open source and has closed source because we actually use a secure element from ST Micro, or you can choose options that are 100% open source if that make you more comfortable. Although in Charles's thread about hardware wallets, he tells why that's a bit of a false sense of security. But I'll let you do your own research on that. Or you could choose, a wallet which is kind of semi-custodial, which then there are some of those which don't have a recovery phrase, but if the company goes away, then you don't have a recourse. Or you could choose a hardware wallet made in China. These are the choices, and you have to think about what do they want. Okay, now if you choose Ledger because it's sort of the highest level of security and the most features, then you can choose if you want this backup service or not. And you definitely, that's why we put CoinCover like right in it. It's not like we don't hide CoinCover behind the scenes. There were people doing that last year, like it's a white label service. We don't tell you who's really partnered. We looked at this as, if you're going to sign into the service, you need to know, what's the deal? How does it work? Who are the partners? Who do I have to trust? And also what that coverage is, because that really matters, right? If you've got, $5 million, I wouldn't put it over, just like if I had $5 million, I wouldn't put it in a bank account with $250,000 of FDIC coverage, right? Although maybe that's safe today. But you understand what I mean? So I think that the real bummer here and the real mea culpa is that this went into the release notes. And so, it kind of went, again, that's why I mentioned how long we've been talking about it, and the fact that we had actually announced this in Wired Magazine 2.5 weeks ago, and nobody cared. I think it's kind of the way that this happened. It was in release notes, it went to Reddit, it went to Twitter. I think if we'd have had till next week to proactively tell people about the service and what it is and what the benefits are, then we certainly would have had many people who said, hey, I don't want that from Ledger. I no question. But I think people would have also seen the benefit, and the benefit for the overall ecosystem, since I think all of us do want to bring people into the space. We want them to be self-custodial and not custodial, and we want them to be secure. And then the question to ask ourselves is, are all of those people going to build their own hardware, build their own explorers? Of course not. So you're going to have to trust someone. The question is who?
So my question there is, so the difference between opting in and not is you are giving your information over to this third party, and then your seed phrase is sharded in three, and given over to three different custodians in each in their own jurisdiction. If you don't
and you're paying
opt in,
$10 a month,
and you're paying $10 a month, and if you don't opt in, then what kind of access does Ledger have to your seed phrase? Because I think
the exact same access they had yesterday.
Okay. But how
your
does
wallet,
that happen?
whatever your wallet is, has your private key. I don't care if it's MetaMask or Trezor, whomever.
Sure.
That's how it signs a
I
transaction.
think the assumption, and I mean, this is what I thought when I'm using a hardware wallet, is I'm creating an account, I'm generating a seed phrase, and that seed phrase is mine to hold and it's not going to leave this piece of hardware. And nobody has access to it, only I do. Like, that's what I assumed was happening. And I think a lot of people did assume the same thing, and so that's why they're like, oh wait, it's not actually how it works. So if we can just clarify how it actually works, in what way can Ledger actually access that seed phrase?
Well, I would two things. One, I would three, I guess. One, I would definitely recommend reading Charles's tweet thread on this, because he does a great job of, and again, he's the CTO, so I should defer to him. And I really don't want to screw it up. I do have a degree in computer science, but it's from 1994, and I'm not a cryptographer or a security expert. So I always want to give that caveat, and really encourage people to do their own research and read the tweet thread from Charles, because he does a great job. Yeah, should be on the Ledger tweet thing. It's the technical, the one about how hardware wallets work from Charles. He also did a technical teardown of Ledger Recover that you can look at as well. But I encourage everyone to look at both of those and decide for yourself. But my kind of layman's understanding of it, I completely understand your confusion, Camilla. I think this is actually one of the main things that a lot of people are coming to the realization of. And I think that if there is a silver lining on all of this, it's that we'll have a lot of people who understand how wallets work a lot better next week than we did last week, because people are kind of forced to do the deep dive. And another thing, I think it's important to distinguish between what does Ledger know versus what's inside the nano, right? Because what's important is that you keep your private key offline, right? And that is exactly what a hardware wallet does. And again, I say hardware wallet because none of what I'm saying is specific to Ledger. So what a hardware wallet does is it keeps your private key offline. In the case of, I think you should ask where that private key is in the case of each hardware wallet. In the case of MetaMask, it's in your browser. In the case of Trezor, it is in a place that isn't a secure element. In the case of Ledger, it's in a secure element. And anytime you do a transaction, so let's say you do an Ethereum transaction, I'm going to send you 2 ETH. I'm going to sign that transaction. So, what Ledger is doing is, you're creating that transaction in, say, Ledger Live or another wallet that uses Ledger. it is, your private key is needed to sign the transaction so that, you can say, yes, this is really me, and I am authorized to make this transaction on the blockchain. The device then, hashes that, bundles it up into a transaction, and it is then broadcast on the blockchain, right? So that all happens inside the ledger. And I think that's the other thing when people say, what does Ledger know? In a way, they mean, what does Ledger's servers know? And what we're talking about is what is inside the nano and inside the secure element. Because what's important in security is, that your private key is inside of the secure element, that it stays there when the transaction happens, so it doesn't come out of the secure element and into the operating system of your iPhone while the transaction happens, and that you have a secure screen so that when you sign the transaction, you can trust that what you see is what you sign. Those are the three things you need to get security. And you get all three of those things with the nano, but the nano does have your private key. That's exactly what it's protecting. So that private key could be signing an Ethereum transaction. It also, could be generating a recovery phrase, encrypting it, sharding it into 3, and sending it to 3 others. It depends what the application does. And remember that Ledger is an application platform. And Charles talks about this in his thread. All of our applications do go through review. There is protection between those applications. So one application can't step on another. They're all happening on a secure element, which are kind of notoriously hard to program. I had a bug with my with the stacks that Ledger stacks that I've been using this year, because there was a bug, and when it freaks out, it doesn't just freak out, it like shuts down for like 12 hours. Like that's what's great about a secure element, is that you don't get kind of a buffer overrun. You get like, this thing sees an instruction it doesn't expect, it freaks out. That's the advantage of using secure elements. So there again, I understand the concern, but there actually isn't anything new versus yesterday.
Okay. So when you sign transactions inside the ledger, like your ledger wallet, with your seed phrase, okay, so yes, like the device itself has my seed phrase, and that's why you can sign transactions. But like, what does like Ledger as a company actually, like, are you storing those, like, that
That's a great
information in
question.
your servers, or?
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, we are, our policy is I don't want any data that we don't need. So even in this case, we don't store any of the personal data. That is all with the provider coin cover. And also remember that no party, none of the three, can actually alone reconstruct your key, right? All three have to come together in the nano, right? So the process actually has to work where all three come together and in the nano. So no one ever sees your private key unencrypted. No one ever sees your whole key even encrypted, and no party sees your private key unencrypted, because the recovery is done inside the nano. We don't keep any of that data. Look, there are other services with Ledger. When you buy crypto through Ledger Live, as an example, using MoonPay or Ramp or whomever you use, you'll often, depending on the amount, depending on the jurisdiction, et cetera, need to go through an identification process. But just like that, it's completely optional. People who are trying to hide their identity and their ownership of crypto should definitely not use this service. But
Right.
Our feeling is that the next 100 million people, there will be many people where that's not why they're coming to crypto. I was with an art collector in the fine art world on Tuesday night, and she really wants to come in, to this world. She really wants and needs this product, like she doesn't want to manage, or at least, be the sole manager of her recovery phrase. She wants some,
Sure.
we want her to have self-custody, we want her to have security, but we also want her to have a great experience.
For sure.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Owen.
Yeah.
Right.
I was
Okay,
just gonna say,
Thank
like,
you. You've been listening very quietly. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Oh, it's all good. I'm just I'm a fly on the wall, I guess. Excuse me. I mean, I think the thing that people are partially unnerved by is like, it's that, I mean, caveman brains, like that the seed phrase can get access through a firmware update. And I know that has maybe been the case since Ledger started, but I think that's, anyways, I'm not sure if we've clarified that. Maybe we've already hit that point, but like,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
and
hope
maybe
that
that's
people
just like,
realize
it is
that.
what it is.
I hope that
Yeah.
I hope that people realize that's the case in every single wallet you use.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
That-
because your wallet has to sign transactions, and to sign transactions, it needs your private key. And I like it because it actually does really get to, you know, what do people need to be concerned about when they choose a hardware wallet. And we talk about this. There's a video or a podcast that I did with Charles back in December, and I always refer to it because I feel like everyone should watch it. Charles is, when I talk about this stuff, it sounds like marketing. When Charles talks about it, it sounds like physics. You know, and I think it's fantastic because he really goes through, you know, very kind of meticulously what you need to be secure. So again, first of all, you're going to need to trust someone, unless you're going to build your own computer and your own electronics and your own blockchain explorers and everything. You're going to need to trust someone. Then the question is who and how. And so, you know, for us, and this is where our security standards are: secure element. The private key lives in the secure element. When you do a transaction, it stays in the secure element, and secure screen. And so you can break down other solutions, you know, so software wallet has none of the above. And look, even if somebody tells you they're using, you know, the secure, you know, zone, the trust zone type of thing inside the phone, they've got to take it out of there, you know, and put it in a less secure place when they do the transaction. And, you know, and then there are other things which don't have a secure screen. And then there are other things which don't have a secure element. So, you know, that's up to the user. Now, in any case, when you make a transaction, you have to prove what you're really doing. When you make a transaction is you're proving that you are the owner of the private key that is the companion to that public key out on the blockchain. And that's just fundamentally what you're doing. And the secret recovery phrase is derived from the private key, right? So, you know, it's very doable. You know, you know, and so that's why, but I also, by the way, this is, most consumers shouldn't understand this. You know what I mean? Like, this is, how many of us understand how our phones work in this level of detail? I don't understand how this microphone works in this level of detail. But that's why this world is different. You know, we're moving from this like revolution of information, which was the internet, where we just say yes, 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 accept, 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 accept. And, you know, I just moved from iPhone to Android, and you're reminded of like how big companies own your ass. And we're moving to, you know, a self-sovereign revolution of value that is, you know, operated on wallet connected apps. So, you know, in a way, the stakes are higher, and we should understand how our wallets work at this level of complexity. So it is a lot to ask. And I also think that the way that we did this caused more confusion than it should have. You know, the fact that this was leaked in release notes ahead of us being able to announce the service next week is a real faux pas on our part. So I think that, you know, plenty that we can do better. But, you know, that's why we're really trying now to get people to understand, okay, here's what it is, here's what it isn't, here's where we stand. And to your, maybe to really put a point on your question, we are a privacy first company. We've done more over the last 3 years since that data leak to make sure that our data surface is really low. If you order from ledger.com, I have whatever information you gave us for the period of time that I'm legally required to, you know, by tax authorities to know who bought, you know. And by the way, I spent 18 months with Shopify getting them to change the amount of time I needed to keep data on their servers, because
How
it's
long
so
is
important
that?
to us.
And after that, is it like destroyed or what happens?
It depends on the jurisdiction, but yeah, it's 3 to 6 months, I believe. I'd have to ask our chief data officer to be sure. So, you know, don't take my word for that, but it's on the order of that. And yes, we delete all customer data as soon as that legal requirement is up. And that's just an example of, you know, we have a chief data officer. We are data minimal. Let's say you buy, you know, crypto with Ramp through Ledger. We have none of that information, right? I don't need your personal data. I don't want your personal data. Quick story. I mean, I was at Apple and sitting in the room with the team. I was running Apple Music, but one of my colleagues was building Apple Pay. And I'll never forget when, you know, Apple didn't want any of the transactions to ever touch Apple's servers. And that impressed me so much, right? It really meant something to me, because I'll never forget Eddie Q saying that, you know, consumer trust is more important is more valuable than consumer data. and that's such a departure from Web 2. I really felt strongly about it, and it's an ethic that we carry into Ledger.
Okay.
Hey Ian, thanks so much for. Oh, sorry, Cami. I just had a couple of questions actually.
Sure.
I think more than the feature itself, and I say this as a Ledger user myself for the last few years.
Thank you.
The messaging has always been kind of consistent that the key can't leave the secure element. It's always inside the wallet. So the realization that this was how it was all along isn't really kind of putting people at ease. And number two, I think another concern that people have is, yes, the key is split into three parts, but what if a government or police compels those three corporations to like put the keys together? What happens then? Right?
Sure. Yeah, both. Thanks for the question. Both really, really good questions. So the first one really comes back to the recap on how hardware wallets work, right? Because what you're talking about is true, and it's enforced by the firmware, if that makes sense, right? Because the private key is in the secure element, the firmware runs on the secure element, and then the firmware decides what can and can't be done. So again, I'll point people to Charles's post on this, because I don't want to pretend that I'm the CTO of Ledger. I know enough to explain it in layman's terms. So think of it that way, right? You've got a secure element, you've got firmware running on top of the secure element. The firmware enforces what can and can't be done. So one of the features of the firmware is that separation of applications, so that a Cardano app can't get access to to a private key of Bitcoin, etc. And then you also have the fact that anytime that your private key is used, you are prompted on a secure screen. That is fundamentally what Ledger does. If an application asks to utilize your private key, then you are asked and you're prompted. And that's what happens when you confirm a transaction, right? So is this the transaction you want to make? Yes, it is. Okay. Yet, do you want to sign it? Yes, I do. Okay, let me get your Ethereum private key, sign this transaction, bundle the transaction, and distribute it on the Ethereum blockchain, as an example. So that is, and so in that way, your private key doesn't leave the ledger. But again, if you allow an approved and authorized application to access your private key, it can access your private key. And then one of the things you could do with that private key is encrypt it, shard it into 3, and give it to 3 custodians, if that's what the approved application does, if that makes sense. So I totally appreciate and understand the kind of the surprise and the mental hurdle of that. It was I think it was a little unexpected for us, but I also think that's partly because of the users that we're talking to first. We thought we were going to be talking to new users coming into the space who would like seed phrase backup and recovery because their recovery phrase is scary to them. And instead we're talking to kind of OGs in the space who and it's interesting because they're sort of an in-between. The security experts are like, well, yeah, of course, that's how a hardware wallet works. And then there's OGs who are like, look, I don't know how a hardware wallet works, but I didn't think Ledger had access to this, right? And that's where you are. And I totally appreciate the position and understand the question. But I hope that like clears things up. And again, I hope that we all kind of end up with as a community, a good sense of how hardware wallets work, so that we can make smart choices when we choose hardware wallets. Now, the other question is about government officials having that. Again, if you're trying to hide from the government, please don't use Ledger Recover, because you are not giving to the government, but you are giving to our partner CoinCover your identification. That doesn't get associated with your private key or your wallet address, right? You've got an account. Your account has your identification in it. That's then sent to CoinCover. And I'm also not a lawyer, but I think it would be quite difficult to do discovery on that, because you've got 3 different parties. Ledger doesn't have any of that data. But let's say that if you were a mass murderer, that I have no idea. I'm not a lawyer, but like if that's the if you're in the realm of not wanting to give the government or any third party any of your personal data, this product is not for you. Again, I think it's important to think about who this product is for, right? We sell millions of nanos in a year. We sell them at Best Buy. We sell them, ultimately, I think Ledger Stacks will be sold at Target. My belief is that, crypto goes to billions of users in my lifetime. And I think that, to do that, we want to get there, and we still need security and self-custody. If this goes to billions of users and everyone's on a .com that looks like FTX, like, what have we accomplished? If not self-custody, why crypto? But so how do we get 100 million people and more, to self-custody? We need to help them and provide, better ease of use without compromising on self-custody in crypto. It's funny that no one's, we're talking about this week, and we're not talking about the Nike drop, which is 100% custodial. Is it crypto?
Yeah, I think that those are all really, fair points. I guess the issue here is that, when you're entering into a relationship with a crypto company that is centralized and custodial, like you do that knowing that you're giving away control, and that you're trusting this third party. When you're using a hardware wallet, you're doing that because you're going kind of the self-custody route, and you do that because you want to have all of the control. So I think it's kind of that middle ground that people are uneasy with.
That's right. Totally agree.
Yeah.
And what I would sincerely say to people is, if you're not comfortable, and you really should think about it before you sign up for Ledger Recover, you should understand what it does, who the partners are, what the risks might be, and make that decision for yourself. And for me, I think there are certain wallets I would use it on, and certain wallets that I wouldn't. Right. So make that, that's consumer choice is super important to us. And if you don't, then there is nothing changes to your ledger from yesterday to tomorrow.
So, but I bought a ledger, and like many people, I was just a kid in 2017, and I was like, oh, everyone's saying Coinbase is dangerous. I bought a ledger, and definitely in kind of, I guess, Ledger's defense, I'm just my brain, I'm just okay, I have this literally this physical thing I can hold. I don't need to deal with it. And it feels very secure. So I guess my question is, in future, are there ways, because it seems like the firmware can access the key. Should we permit it? I don't know. Correct. Is there a world where we can, and it's fine, all these things are a spectrum, different, like you're saying, different solutions for different people. People need clarity about what they're getting when they have a ledger. So it's but is there a world where you are forced to upgrade your firmware? That happens with iPhones and stuff, where you just need to do it to run the latest browser or something. Are people going to get,
can you be compelled to give away your seed phrase?
Yeah, at some point, can you have this firmware? Can you can this get packaged in to a point? Obviously you don't.
Well, there's two separate questions. Okay. One is if you want the device to be upgradable, right? Mm-hmm. By the way, we remember when Bitcoiners were upset because we supported Ethereum, right? Sure. So this is the way this goes. But people do want their devices to be upgradable, right? So you have new features. You have, maybe there was a security threat, and you do need to upgrade. So there are certainly reasons to upgrade. You will never be compelled to use a backup. We're never going to change Ledger to say Ledger is only available if you pay us $10 a month for Ledger Recover. We would never do that. It wouldn't make any sense. Yeah. So there, and the thing is I know that, I think that, again, people want us to people have said, why not just keep it as a separate device? It's well, the device you have is capable of this. That doesn't change if I put it in a box and put a different word on the box. Mm-hmm. Right. So, the question is, would we compel you to use the service? Absolutely not. Right. Cool. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we got all the questions.
Thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this. It's a great example. I mean, you guys know a lot, and but it's normal that that those of us who are enthusiastic and users and excited about crypto, don't have the depth of knowledge of how wallets work that Charles Guillemet does. That's totally normal. So really happy to have a chance to explain it and explain the service. And I do think
we really appreciate you coming on the show, and just being just being really great at answering all of the questions and just providing more clarity. I mean, that's what everyone needs right now.
Really happy to come on absolutely anytime. I love the show. I'm a listener, so I always love being on something that I actually listen to. So thanks a lot for having me.
That's great to hear. All right. Yeah. Okay. So I think we can wrap it up. I don't see any new questions on the chat, and unless Owen or Wewisi, do you have any final cues for Ian?
Yeah, I think I'm good, and I'm happy everyone is thinking more, including myself, because I definitely wanted to just offload thinking about this. So
I'm super glad Charles did that second thread, because at first we just had the thread on how on the teardown on how Recover actually works, and then he realized from the conversation he was on Bankless. He did a number of appearances, and he realized, like, okay, I need to do a thread on how wallets work. And so it's good that that's out there. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, I told my family today that I understand how my ledger works more this week than last week. And like I said, I have a degree in computer science. I've been in crypto since 2014. I've worked at Ledger for 2 years and 5 months. Like, wow, it's and another thing, I mean, I feel like we're watching our users, and not only our users, but our customer care team climb the same curve, right? I mean, you can imagine, right? We've got people that are trying to respond to people on Twitter that, and they don't have the depth of knowledge that Charles does either. So it's really, it's a lot of work, but it's important to me. I mean, you talked about regulation at the top of the show. Pascal and I were in DC last week, talking to regulators, and I think this is a super important issue, because if we don't have decentralization, we don't have security, right? So that's another thing, is this is a decentralized way to deliver people self-custody with a bit of peace of mind. And I think the way to think about it is, if not this, then what? Right. That's and I think we should think about that going forward, because as we were explaining to the politicians in Washington, it's like, okay, if you don't want crypto and you don't want, decentralized security, whose centralized databases do you want all this data to live in? Right. Sure. Because that's really the choice that humanity faces. And, we're just sort of chipping away at that, in my view.
Yeah, right on. Absolutely. All right, cool. Ian, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, super pleasure. I'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, that was super helpful. I'm glad we did that. It definitely answered kind of a lot of the questions, but I don't know if like people are gonna feel more at ease or not, because it's like, okay, like Ledger could do this all along, but yeah, at the same time, I definitely see Ian's point. Like there's a need for this type of product, like especially for just like the mainstream user, you want this recovery feature. But yeah, if you want to go kind of the fully, if you don't want to have to trust anyone with your seed phrase, then what? Like what are your options? There aren't that many like secure options, right?
Sorry, I just got it.
Back to paper wallets.
Yeah.
It's kind of the conclusion.
We enter a seed phrase every time we want to make a transaction.
Yeah.
Then put it back on the piece of paper, fold it up.
I remember in 2018, like writing something down, and then it was like I wrote an N, but it looked like a V or something, and it was just like, I don't know, just like a day of like panic. I don't know, just messing around with stuff. So, anyways.
But I think like another conclusion is if you are going to have full control over your assets, that also adds an extra layer of responsibility of not just holding those assets, but being just extremely knowledgeable and informed about all of the different services that you're using for that. Because yeah, like I think people trusted hardware wallets maybe without realizing many of the points that we were just talking about, that everyone, like all hardware wallets apparently have access to your seed phrase. And this is just one example, but I think it goes for like any service that you're using in your kind of self-custody journey.
Yeah, I mean, apparently it's just one malicious firmware update away from, your key getting taken out of the device, which is, I think, the main kind of point of contention, that
Yeah.
even if it was the case all along, I'd bet 90% of hardware wallet users did not know about it or did not realize it.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty much what everyone's saying. Like, it doesn't even matter if you switch to another hardware wallet, because if this affects everyone, it just, I mean, I guess it's like Ian said, right? Who do you trust more?
Yeah.
You have to trust someone.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like, I wonder if programmatically it can be set in stone that like you can't expose your seed phrase without at least sending a transaction on your ledger, like, which gives you some peace of mind. Like if okay, you can have a firmware update, but like you still have to, if that is programmatically set in stone that you have to approve it, that makes me feel better than if like that could happen in a way that I don't quite understand. But although obviously a firmware update could just be packaged in some way, but it couldn't have the detail that, as part of this update we're actually exporting your private key or something. So yeah, definitely a lesson in hardware security. So
yeah, it is a bit unsettling.
Yeah, talking to the Solana phone people, I think they have like the same, secure element, they have, I think, kind of the same setup where it's like it's its own little mini computer, and it kind of, I remember talking to them, and it actually takes over the screen of the Solana phone when you're signing a transaction. So it's like literally a different display, or a different computer is feeding into the display. But it made it sound like a hardware wallet is similar actually to the Saga, and not as like differentiated as I thought. I thought of the Saga as more intermediate, but it seems like hardware wallets are maybe a little bit more intermediate as well, security wise.
So I think it was like big, lots of lessons learned by crypto OGs this week. We ate up almost all the time talking about Ledger, but I think it's definitely worth it. So I don't know. Should we do like a speed run through the other headlines? Do you guys think?
Let's do it.
All right.
Sure. Yeah, we can do a quick one.
All right. Okay. YYC, do you wanna walk us through like markets this week, and also the latest meme coin saga?
Oh, absolutely. This is something that you have to see to believe, to be honest. So just going back to the story, if we can. So Ben.eth was basically this random guy until he could be any of us as Web3 participants, right? He was just a random NFT collector, used to shitpost a little bit on Twitter, etc., and active in a few NFT communities and whatnot. But then he decided to launch this coin called Ben, right? Which taking advantage of meme coin season, and this coin got picked up by BitBoy. Ben Armstrong. Obviously, he liked the name, and apparently they made a deal to either share control or he took over the project or whatnot, and the token, obviously, he pumped it to his 1 million or so followers, and I think it performed really well. It hit like a market cap of nearly 70 million. But then, after handing over control of that project, Ben.eth decided that he's going to launch a new coin. And given the success of the previous one, obviously, how degens are quite, susceptible to FOMO. So he said, send ETH to this, to my Ben.eth address and, get an allocation in the pre-sale. But people actually went wild over it. They sent over $7 million worth of ETH. That's probably the biggest meme coin pre-sale ever. And he got a lot of flack for it while the pre-sale was running, because first it was supposed to be a few hours, then it became days, then the token was delayed again and again, and I guess he was enjoying the attention, and even we did a story on it, right? So mission accomplished. And the ETH kept pouring in, and finally the token launched last night, right? And a complete mess. So if I let me just go back to my screen now. So if you look at the token, you look at the chart, you say, oh yeah, this looks like a good launch, right? Like it's up and to the right, 500 million FDV, 30 million of liquidity, sounds good, right? But if we dig a little deeper, we first of all, there are a couple of things off about this particular token. Number one, he's used Uniswap V3 to set up the pool instead of V2. So if we scroll down, we can see that out of the so-called nearly 30 million of liquidity, only less than 2 million is ETH. The rest is just loaded up with PSYOP tokens. Number two, even the pre-sale participants haven't got most of their tokens. If we look at Etherscan, Ben.eth still has nearly 95% of the supply. Right? And people who tried to buy the coin earlier this morning got completely finished. So, like this guy, for example, he tried to buy 1 ETH worth of coins, and his 1 ETH became point. Like he lost almost all of it, right? Even swapping it back, he'd lose more than 100%.
Is that just slippage, and he wasn't paying attention?
I don't think it was just slippage, because the pool was so imbalanced at the start, right? With barely any ETH and so much of the other token, the pricing was completely off. And there were multiple cases of this, right? So you can see this guy tried to swap 60 ETH and got 12 PSYOP tokens.
Nice.
And of course, he says, he's blaming slippage and whatnot. And apparently the rest of the tokens are coming in batches over the next few days. So until then, I guess pre-salers are held hostage. And so if you put 10 ETH into a PSYOP, you basically got 1 ETH back. A lot of people predicted it. I mean, it was, who knows how the project's going to play out over the next days, weeks, as the rest of the supply comes in. But yeah, complete, to me, this screams peak FOMO. So are meme coins going to be back in action, or just another flash in the pan craze? We'll have to see.
Yeah, I think it's time to shut that down, I think.
A lot of people are frustrated with it too. They're like, what? Like, this is just a waste of time. Gives crypto a bad name.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Just funneling $7 million into an address before there was even a token. And now this like really disastrous launch. Yeah, it's not good.
For him, it's a good launch.
Yes, for him.
He's an entrepreneur now.
Yeah, he'll be like VC next cycle, I'm sure.
Of course.
Oh boy.
And there's literally nothing behind this token, right? Like what's the idea behind PSYOP?
As a PSYOP, so
it's a fun name. That's it.
Yeah. Good ticker.
Yeah. And has he said? Is he gonna do anything with these funds? Like, is this money gonna be used to develop something around this token, or is it literally just a meme?
I mean, it's unknown at this stage, I think. Nothing's been said or set. Well, nothing can be set in stone, I guess. But yeah, we just have to wait and see. As of now, I think it's just the meme.
Okay. And again, like this weird pricing, it's slippage, and it's how the Uniswap pool was set up, that it was so imbalanced between ETH and PSYOP. What explains it?
Yeah, I mean, usually meme coins or use Uniswap V2 because it's the 50-50. You need 50 like equal amounts of both assets, right? So it's a smoother distribution for coins like this, which are extremely volatile. But this pool was set up on V3, which led to insane slippage, and I think it was very fragmented liquidity to begin with. So a lot of it was set at a really high price. So once people were like aping in, like a stampede of orders came in, so I'd imagine the liquidity at lower prices got eaten up really fast. So people who were trying to rush in with high gas then suddenly start paying insane prices for it. But that leveled out within the first like half hour or so, I think, as more people started adding liquidity and whatnot.
Yeah, because Uniswap's interface, I mean, it says how much you're getting, right? Like it doesn't. That's why I'm just surprised. It's like you have to at least look at that, right?
I mean, yeah, but if you're trading meme coins, you're generally setting your slippage to like 30%, 40%.
Really?
If you're trying to snipe the token early, so you're in expert mode and you've already like signed away all your safety warnings, because you're just going for speed. So you just be like, so usually the process would be when a new meme coin launches, right? So you get the contract address, go to your Uniswap, which is already kind of preset with like high slippage, high gas, paste that in and just hit send, right? Because that's if you want to snipe the tokens early, like that's what you have to do, and just pray that you get a decent execution, which these people
That's so
clearly
risky. That really is like truly degen. Guys, just like be careful out there. I mean, on the one hand, it's funny. It's like everyone's like freaking out about like Ledger like potentially having this backdoor, but like it's like this. It is like a black swan event, something happening to Ledger that it'll expose your seed phrase. And on the other hand, like people are just like signing away their transactions to get the latest like meme coin, so it's like these extremes with handling risk.
Yeah, I mean, we don't mind getting rugged with permission, right? It's just the unknown that scares us.
Sure. All right. Okay. Okay. Then moving on, like very quickly, other headlines. I guess. And you did this story, but it's Tether had their latest report, and interesting that they're buying Bitcoin with profits, right? That's kind of the gist.
Yeah, and
that's
it's just interesting. Yeah, and it's. I mean, I think they're just making a lot of money off the treasury.
Oh yeah, that was I think Owen is frozen, but that was interesting in this story. A little tidbit here saying that Tether actually had more profits than like Netflix and like other huge like big tech companies, and so they're diversifying some of their holdings by buying Bitcoin. And to be clear, like they're buying Bitcoin with profits, but they're not using Bitcoin as collateral for Tether. So that's something to clarify, right?
Totally. Yeah. And just one other point, Sam Kaismian, I might be getting his last name wrong, but yeah, he just made the point that like it is a great business that they're in, I think, and other stablecoin providers with reserves, because partially with high rates, you have treasuries, you're getting paid through treasuries. With low rates, presumably your assets have more upward pressure, so they go up in that context. So just the setup is good, and that's partially, I think, why Sam is charging so hard to, build Frax's market cap as much as he can. So.
Yes. Cool. Then moving on, Lido enabled stake ETH withdrawals with V2 rollout. Yeah. So obviously, this comes after Chapella and stakers being able to withdraw ETH from Ethereum. Now you can do that from Lido. Anything else to add about this story? It's interesting.
I'm not sure. Yeah, it was from Sam.
Yeah.
But he said you can compete with rocket pools, mini pools, which I don't quite understand how that is going to happen. But anyways, maybe people can deposit smaller amounts.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, they've launched a new staking router. Right?
Okay.
That's basically one of the big changes in V2. So in V1, I believe there were like 29 handpicked validators, and the ETH was all spread out amongst them. But with V2, there's a staking router that allows anyone to apply and basically become a node provider in time,
Cool.
And then people can choose to like stake with them.
Okay.
So kind of boosting decentralization of the validator set, I think, which is one of the main critiques of Lido, right? So
yeah, that's a huge development for Lido. I think that was one of the main criticisms, that it was like centralized and permissioned in its set of validators. So that's great to see. We also had the story about the MakerDAO roadmap for the endgame plan. Super interesting. It's crazy how like Maker's undergoing this like really dramatic change, and like they're proposing a whole new DAI token, a whole new Maker token, even an entirely new blockchain to host Maker. So they're proposing like an app chain, kind of like what Compound proposed earlier, and like a migration to new DAI and Maker tokens. So like the current DAI and Maker tokens would still kind of be trading as usual, but then there would be like this separate ecosystem of DAI and Maker. Like they will be called differently, and Maker holders will be able to trade in their old Maker for new Maker. So it's this huge overhaul, and the idea is the whole kind of plan towards the end game that Rune is proposing is supposed to make Maker more permissionless, like not more censorship resistant, and having it DAI be backed by crypto and not by stable coins, not by real world assets, reduce like regulatory risk, and have Maker just be even more decentralized than it is, with sub DAOs running each different kind of area within the MakerDAO's operations. Now each sub DAO will have their own token to incentivize their operations. So I don't know, it's like a really complex upgrade that they're planning.
I mean, it makes no sense to me, to be honest. Like
yeah.
Like Maker's basically Rune's playbox, right? Like he does, he controls governance, so he can do whatever he wants. But I actually saw someone point out on Twitter, right? Like if you want to find tokenomics worst practices, just look at what Maker does. Right? Like that's been like Degen Spartan hates Maker, right? Like that's been at least the tokenomics. But I mean, DAOs already have enough trouble trying to get people to vote when like you have one DAO and like it's simple enough, and you can see like Maker proposals have like 10 voters, So if you create 10 sub DAOs, like, are you really going to have people participating, or is it going to be the same people, just
I guess
redundantly?
the argument there would be like, when you have like really specialized DAOs, you get people that are more involved in each specific function than having to expect everyone to vote on everything about Maker. So say like now you have a token that's dedicated to like this one specific function within Maker, and according to like this plan, that would incentivize more participation because you're just like, you have more knowledge and you're more involved in what's happening in these kind of smaller DAOs. But I don't know, that's obviously theoretical, and who knows if it'll actually work out that way. But I think that's kind of the rationale behind it. Yeah, and there's like this like AI
government
powered
bureaucracy, right?
Yeah, they have this whole AI aspect to it now too, like AI powered governance tools. I don't know. I think it like increases complexity so much. Like having a new chain and a couple, like a new stablecoin, a new token, new DAOs. Like I don't know. Like I can understand again like the rationale behind it, and wanting to be like fully decentralized, like fully censorship resistant, sure, but I don't know, like is it how it's gonna pan out? Like it's really hard to see.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like ripping up one of DeFi's biggest protocols and making it seemingly more complicated. It doesn't feel like what DeFi needs,
Right?
or what Maker needs. But
Yeah.
People want simplicity, like
Mhm.
simpler stable coins, backed purely by crypto, no centralized, back to basics. I mean, like the first DAI, or PSY as it's called now, right?
yeah,
Instead of that, we're going further down the complexity rabbit hole. I mean, if DeFi veterans can't understand what's going on, I mean, how do you expect new users to, right?
yeah.
No. I mean, I think in part they are trying to bring DAI back to its roots, but the whole like operations around it is what's becoming more complex. Like just running MakerDAO is now gonna take like 6 mini DAOs, and just migrating the whole thing. I don't know. It seems like way too complicated.
Hopefully it gets simple. Like maybe you got to get complicated to get simple in the end. But if they're not gunning for simplicity, then it's like no way, because Maker was so hard to cover when I write stories about it. And if it's going to get harder to cover, I don't know. That makes me kind of bearish, I suppose. So.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Now, just wrapping up with a few regulatory news that we had. EU approved MiCA. So now, with like 27 EU governments, jurisdictions now are run by the same set of regulations and guidelines for exchanges and stable coins, which makes things a lot easier for crypto companies operating in Europe. It's Europe is bringing clarity to crypto, and that's the main thing that the industry is asking for right now, like just knowing the playing field and how to operate. So just summarizing what MiCA does. Exchange operators must receive national licensing in the country in which they're headquarters. Stablecoin issuers are required to maintain sufficient reserves. And and then there's a set of licensing and due diligence regimes for what's virtual asset providers, service providers. a framework for issuing utility tokens, stablecoins, and other digital assets. So yeah, I think overall this is great news for crypto in Europe. And then we have the opposite happening in the US. So Coinbase asking for regulatory clarity, and the SEC said, nope, we're not going to give you that. Yeah.
Or
Oh,
specifically, specifically there was Coinbase filed something called a memandus, which at a super high level suggests that I believe, and a lawyer may correct me, like a government agency is not quite doing its job. In this case, they were saying that the SEC is moving too slowly based on a rulemaking position, that petition, which Coinbase filed in July 2022, and they're saying they're not moving fast enough. And that was what garnered an amicus brief from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the largest U.S. Business advocacy group, last week. And then this week, the SEC responded with basically saying, no, we're fine. We're kind of going to continue doing what we're doing. There's precedent for pursuing enforcement actions while deliberating over rulemaking frameworks and new procedures. So it kind of seemed like they just doubled down on their current position and didn't do it there, didn't concede any wrongdoing. And some people thought good for the SEC. Some people thought not that. So yes.
Yeah. So we'll continue seeing regulation by enforcement from the SEC. Then U.S. court excluded 48,000 BlockFi users from a near $300 million payout, and Anchorage, crypto custodian, now will enable institutional clients to participate in DeFi governance. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and seeing if institutions start getting more involved in DeFi. Wow. Okay. So I think we went over the main headlines that we covered this week. Lots going on, but main thing was obviously Ledger. So for those of you joining later, later in the show, we had a really interesting interview with Ian Rogers, Ledger's Chief Experience Officer, explaining, what happened with this upgrade that caused a ton of backlash. Super interesting conversation. We got a lot of clarity, but I don't know if it made things any better. All right. So thanks everyone for joining. While we see Owen, anything to add?
See you guys next week.
See you guys next week.
Yeah. Happy Friday. Bye.
All right.